Welcome to the Let Life Begin podcast, a teaching ministry of Dr. Philip Dunn, Senior Pastor of First Mount Juliet Church. In this podcast, Dr. Dunn will share biblical principles with real-life application. Thank you for listening today.
Welcome to the Let Life Begin podcast, and we're in week 22 of our time together as we walk through the Word each week. And this week we're going to find ourselves reading the rest of Song of Solomon, and we'll introduce the book of Proverbs and read the majority of that. And there's a couple things I want to say about the Song of Solomon. One, I regret I didn't mention anything in the previous podcast because it could have been a help to you as we started through the book. But there's a few things just to note about the Song of Songs. One is that it's called Song of Songs, or it's also referred to as Song of Solomon. It is singular. It's one love story, and it's a literal love story. That's important because throughout the history of the church, people have tried to allegorize it. In other words, to make somehow the lover is God and the beloved is the church or his people in this instance. And I think we miss something here, the beauty of what we find from the very first book in the Bible, the first two chapters, that in the created order, God created man. And by the time that Adam is created and Eve in chapter 2, they are brought together. It's the first wedding. And God has done a wonderful thing. They were to come together, male and female, husband and wife, and be fruitful and multiply. So unfortunately in our culture today, when we talk about physical intimacy, we talk about sexuality, we talk about marriage, people would just assume that we have to learn about those things outside of the church because within the church, that's just not good things to talk about. And yet, there's nothing evil about sexuality inherently. God has given that to us. The beauty of marriage at its height helps us to understand God's love between a man, a husband, and a wife. We know that in Ephesians 5. It mirrors for us the love of Christ for the church. And so there's something very beautiful in love itself, ordained by God in God's rightful way, male and female in the context of marriage. And that's where we find physical intimacy. So all of this is critical. We read this book. It's part of the wisdom literature that God would see fit give to us, and we appreciate then the beauty of love. Now, a couple thoughts. One, people will often criticize this book because God is not mentioned. And there's two books in the Old Testament where you won't find the name God. One of them is this book, Song of Solomon, or Song of Songs, and then the other one is the book of Esther. But yet we find the heart of God in both of these books, the hands of God in both of these books. And it leads us to the love of God. So as you just note, and maybe you've started to read and you want to go back, you can at least do a couple things and just note this, that the three main characters are the woman, the man, and the daughters of Jerusalem. The woman is the beloved, the man is the lover, and the daughters of Jerusalem are the friends of this woman. And we see them come together in love. We see their adoration for one another. We see the virtue of physical beauty that God created, the attraction between a man and a woman in this context. We find them have conflict. They push back. They come back together. I mean, we see a whole love story here. And this is one of those books, too. I would encourage you to have a good Bible study in hand, a study Bible, so which you can look up maybe some cues to help know what's going on. For example, the idea of the vineyard. What is the vineyard here? Well, the vineyard of the woman is her physical body. And I'm just going to say to you that it's very straightforward. And when you read this, it is an amazement that it is in the Bible, but it helps us to appreciate what God has ordained. And what God has called good, let us not call evil. So that's the main footnote. I guess the other thing I would just say about this is it's not for sure that Solomon is describing himself. So it's not for certain that he's the lover. It doesn't quite matter, but the book bears his name and is attributed to him. So enjoy this book in the context of love and part of the literature that God saw fit to have in the canon. So this week, we read through this book, the rest of it, and we begin the book of Proverbs. So there's a helpful way to understand Proverbs that I think that we need to know as we turn our attention to that this week, that without it, we'll kind of get lost in the weeds, and we'll just hear all of these statements and anecdotes and stories, and we won't kind of put together the precision by which the author had compiled all of these thoughts to give us a message. First of all, the cue for us in understanding this whole book is found at the very beginning in chapter 1, and you'll just read in the very beginning verses, those first 7 verses. It says, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Now, he wrote most of what we are to read here, but not all of it, but most of it. And we can appreciate that because Solomon is giving to us something that he knew was wisdom for life. And if you'll notice, wisdom for those who are young. And we're going to find a little bit of that same messaging in the book of Ecclesiastes, which I believe that King Solomon also wrote, although we can't be as certain. I just don't know who else it could be that was a king of Israel that had his wisdom, his wealth, and all of the things that he experienced in life. And at the end of that book, he appeals to the youth to love God in their youth. And you kind of find that same spirit here in Proverbs. So when you read Proverbs, read it as a father writing to a son. That's what's happening in these first 10 chapters. The first 9 chapters anyway, there's about 10 lessons that the father is giving to a son. And it's all predicated, notice, upon this desire for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, and doing what is right and just and fair. So, not just as a matter of morality, not just as a matter of making good decisions, is he writing, although there's virtue in that, but as those who love God. That's the connecting point. Here are the practical ways to live a wise life. And then he says, for giving prudence to those who are simple. That's the idea of those who are apart from God. And knowledge and discretion to the young. That's kind of the audience here. All ages can benefit from this, but he's saying, here, you young man, here, you young lady, listen to these proverbs, these parables, and the riddles that I'm giving to you to set your life by it. So it's just good wisdom, good teaching, and good truth. But verse 7 should be highlighted. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So, I love Bill Bennett wrote a book years ago on a book of virtues. I've read that to our kids over the years. And then even from my own personal reading, it's got a lot of great stories. And they're very powerful stories, a lot of anecdotes. But that's not what Solomon is doing here. He's not just giving us a bunch of stories to inspire us. He's connecting wise living with the heart of God. And to be a wise person means that you fear God. And we don't often talk about this, but fear is at the part of, really a part of our faith, and at the heart of this recognition that we are mere mortals and we were created by a holy, wonderful, majestic God who has all power and all dominion and all authority upon the earth. And to put your life in that vein is to then heed what he has given to us. And we find that then in these next chapters. The first bit here of these chapters that we read are really important as you think about just the relationship of a father to a son. I'd mentioned that to you a moment ago. And as he's writing to a son in that vein, and we read and we listen in and we hear all of these words, that phrase, listen, my son, listen, my son. How to handle temptation, how to handle our own physical relationships with a woman, and vice versa. All of that wisdom that he's giving here is to be given in light of one who wants to love God and live for God. And wisdom is personified. It's not even that wisdom is just a choice that you make. It's that a wise person loves God and a foolish person rejects God. And there's a contrast that you'll see throughout these proverbs that are given. So you'll look for all of those antithetical phrases. As you read this, remember, it's Hebrew poetry at its finest. And we have to understand the way that language works. I'll just go ahead and mention something that'll be in next week's reading of Proverbs, but it occurs to me in chapter 26, you'll have these two phrases that are lined beside each other, one after the other. So check this out. In verse 4 of 26 in Proverbs, it says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him." Well, then you read the very next verse, verse 5, and it says, "Answer a fool according to his folly, or he'll be wise in his own eyes." And so what do you do with that? Like, which of those proverbs are you supposed to listen to? And I think it's important to note that just the way that the Hebrews thought contrast was a way of really imparting the point. And the point here is sometimes it's wise to speak, sometimes it's wise to say nothing, which is why we need discernment. And we need the Word of God to help us in this. All of us feel like at times somebody is saying something that's just so ridiculous that we want to respond to it, lest they walk away thinking they're right. And then there's other times somebody might be saying something that there'll be another time to address that. We don't need to just speak into all things. And I think it's just a great reminder, but you'll find a lot of things just like this, principles given throughout the book of Proverbs. It's probably more than just this is a general rule by which to live your life principle, but there is a lot of that. A lot of things that are generally true in the kingdom that God has created and this earth that God has created for us. Here are the principles by which we live our lives. And it's always to lead us back to the heart of God. So these first 20 chapters, you'll find, as I mentioned a moment ago, the first 9 are a series of 10 lessons a father gives to a son. Look out for those words, "Listen, my son, to your father's instructions." And then chapters 10 through 22 contain the Proverbs of Solomon. And a lot of contrast in these chapters highlighting wisdom versus folly. Wisdom found in right living, folly found in foolish living. And that's really where the Word of God consistently leads us. A wise man fears God and makes godly decisions, wise decisions. An ungodly man rejects God and makes foolish decision and lives a life of folly. Hear ye, like a father to a son. One of the final things I'd give to you is somebody challenged me when I was a teenager to really read a chapter of Proverbs for the corresponding day that we might be in. And I've tried to do that for all of these years. So I'm thinking probably some 30 years now. And one of the great joys of that is that they're easy to memorize and they're so applicable. I mean, there's just so many great verses just to memorize in your heart and just to give it to the Lord. So I don't even know where to begin. I've highlighted so many things, but these reminders, for your ways are in full view of the Lord. He examines all of your paths. These are 6 things in chapter 6. He says these are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. I mean, when you read that list of 7 things, do you know 3 of them have to do with the tongue? And what are you to make of that? We're to make of this that what we say is really important to God. And so I need to probably be quieter a whole lot more, not share everything that comes to my mind, and not to give everybody a piece of our mind, which, by the way, is not a virtue. A lot of people say, I really give them a piece of my mind. Are you sure that was wise? But at any rate, you read these Proverbs, and it speaks to all of this, from your language, your talk, your thoughts, your walk, your worship, and your relationship. So listen to it in that way and enjoy this week through Proverbs. And that'll wrap up really this week's episode. And let the Word come alive in your heart. And we'll come back and we'll talk about the rest of Proverbs and then Kings and Chronicles in our next episode. God bless you and have a wonderful week in the Word.
Thank you for listening to the Let Life Begin podcast with Dr. Dunn. For more content, follow us on social media platforms and on Spotify. Thank you again for listening.